Fortunately, they can't grow quick enough. They could have 50,000 students for each one of those universities. And, but they've kind of capped it off right there so they can figure out how to grow.
There's no cap on UVU.
There isn't, but I'll tell you what's really cool is things have changed for our children. It's not as good for them as it was for us. And when these kids are graduating with these fabulous degrees, they need a place to live. And what I love about giving back to our communities, I signed a 12-and-a-half-year lease at Midtown 360. I spent $1.3 million on a build-out. I don't even own the building. But I wanted to be there because I want to be in the dark, fertile loam of this fabulous place they call Happy Valley. And for me, it's very happy. And I'll tell you what I like about Midtown 360. I remember driving by when they had fences around it about 10 years ago. And I'm going, that place looks out of place, you know? And it's set as a dinosaur. But there was a guy that came in from LA, he's a billionaire, and he says, you know what? That's an opportunity. And he bought it, and he built another high-rise, and he built the fourth one. And I'll tell you what he does is when you build those fabulous units, they are not cheap. And the construction is far superior than a regular strip mall. Strip malls are uglier than a mud fence. They're just an L shape or a line. When they build a Midtown 360, or here's another perfect example, University Mall is now University Place, and they rebranded themselves. And why did they do that? And why are they relevant and beautiful and functional and busy? And almost every other mall that's like that is going out of business and has vacancy because they figured out that this high density construction draws class and style. It's not cheap construction, but there is that high density in there where people that are trying to graduate with a degree, they don't get an opportunity to move into a single family home because you can't buy a crack house in some parts of this county right now, like Heber and here, for $450,000. They can't afford that, but they can move into a really nice place where I'm at right now. So look at the example of University Place. Because they reinvented themselves and they did something that's really fabulous, people want to come here because it's relevant, it's beautiful, it's structured, it's planned, it makes sense. And I'm going to tell you right now, the wave of people that are coming to Utah County and Salt Lake County, they're coming here for the high-paying jobs, not the low-paying jobs. They're coming here for a lifestyle. And I left Colorado because it was difficult to do business. I wanted to be in a place that's fabulous. When I did my build out of Midtown 360, my gosh, there is no cheap plastic pipe. Everything had to be copper. I had to do fire codes that were blowing my mind because the construction and the quality and the standards are so much higher. And I know these people know that. And when they're building out this mall structure, Midtown 360 structure, it actually adds class, but it gives our children a chance to graduate and start and not move out, but to stay here because there's opportunity. And I know there's growth for all of us, but to stop the wave of what's going to happen to Utah County over the next 5 or 10 years, you might as well try to stop the tide from coming in. So we might as well do it right.
We'll try.
That's my point.
My name is Bryce Barron. No, I don't want to do it right. I don't want to do it at all. Okay, I don't want to do it right. I don't want to do it, period. I'm just going to share a quick story with you, Mayor. You won't remember me. This happened 4 or 5 years ago. I was in the Sierra Theater. You were up for election. And you came over, you were talking to people, and you came over and you said, hey, we'd like you to vote for me. I said, well, where do you stand on high density apartment housing? And you said, look, you want to talk about Trader Joe's. We're going to get Trader Joe's. And I said, I have one question for you, Mayor. What are you going to do with that property in Meadow Gold Dairy? Promise me that will not become high density apartments. And you said, I will not do that. I will not go there. I will not do high apartment density. So please keep your promise, Mayor.
I'm just just curious in this room, if we just took a quick, just general vote, how many people are for the amount of high-density housing currently on the plan? Raise your hand. How many people are, let's see, you guys are for it? For the high-density plan? How many people are against it? That's just this room. That's all I'm saying.
My name is Karen Adamson. I grew up here in Orem. I've lived here my entire life. I have a lot of friends who own businesses on State Street. None of them are aware of this, but this is supposed to be happening right away. My best friend's gym is going to become green space, and they haven't even been told anything about
Just so
it.
you know, we've been working on this for 6 years.
But the business owners are not aware of what is going on. So who did you find this feedback from originally? I don't feel like you actually asked Orem residents. I feel like that was something you put out and said you did, but you didn't.
No, we had the history of all the people that came and looked at it and studied it, and we put postcards out, we invited people to meals, we had open houses, and we don't do it twice, we let other people have a chance.
Okay, I was at that meeting in 2015, and you never said anything about high-density housing directly across the street from my house. That was never mentioned in that meeting in
All right, and we let other
2015. I was
people
there.
talk.
Okay, so also there's maps on the tables. So
It's a done deal.
no, it's not. So you need to look at the maps and then go ahead,
Have a chance.
write your comments on the paper so we understand and we can take it back.
Pass the microphone around. We'd like everyone to have a chance to speak.
I worked in Hawaii for 39 years.
Hold that up to your mouth.
And last I knew, there was a ceiling on the amount of students admitted. Utah Valley University is a different story. Now, when I rebuilt those so-called student housing for supposedly close to Utah Valley, he lied. Because I went up and talked to him at that meeting.
And who is he?
Ivory.
Okay.
And I asked him, I says, is this really student housing? And he said that they couldn't label it that because the university had not purchased the property. And I noticed that since then, there have been complaints about the parking, there have been all kinds of other things going on in that housing because they can't limit it to students. Now, what are you gonna do about that?
Okay, appreciate that comment.
You know, I moved from California in the early 60s to attend BYU, moved to Orem in 1972, and I was quite rural. I thought I was in heaven at that time in that. I woke up that morning, my first home, after having apartments and going through that and having other things, and I had a business and that for 18 years on State Street. So I've been around the block a little bit. So I came from a high-density deal in California, San Jose, okay? My observations are these. I've already been through that. I live on 1236 North, 710 West, supposedly rural and everything. But my question is this. I have seen the crime rate go up in this city to unbelievable measure in that.
And graffiti.
And graffiti and meth houses. I have 3 meth houses that are in my 2-block deal that took me 3 years to get rid of. You have one of the best police forces here, but you know what? They stamp out fire after fire after fire. They do their very best in that. But it has ruined the neighborhood. I live in a pretty nice place in that like that, but I find needles in there. I've gotten into fights, burglaries, you name it, I've had it stolen. And that, so I've been through this high density deal. So you can't tell me about that, but the smog's increased, the law enforcement, and that these officers cannot handle that. We're worried about our kids. I can't even leave my door open, even going in the backyard anymore. So high crime is coming. My neighbor just a few weeks ago got a $60,000 truck stolen. They took it early in the morning, went and robbed a bank in Pleasant Grove. And that, you understand what this density is. We came to Orem to
to have a rural experience in that and controlled growth. That is not happening now. And it's not going to happen with more high density. It's just not. So you're barking at the moon if you think that is going to happen.
We raised our family here in Orem, and we loved Orem, raising it. We have several of our married children, their families here in Orem. You know what they want? They want out of this town. Because the one daughter lives down, she has a nice house, but it's down in the middle of where all those apartments are, down on Geneva Road. And the other son has had problems with his children now because of the crime and the type of people that have come into this town. Anyway, you talk about building places for our children to live. They can't afford the apartments. They don't want to live in apartments. They want to live in homes. But actually what's going on is actually driving our children away from this town.
My name is Linda Wimmer, and I have a question on all the trees that you're wanting to put down State Street, which requires a medium in the middle, which is going to cause a lot of businesses to go out of business because you can't turn into their business easily. It's going to cause more smog because I'm going to have to drive down, make a U-turn if I'm allowed to, or I'm going to have to go clear around the bog to get to a business. And you're saying it's a beautification? No, it's a nightmare. Put the trees in the park where they can be enjoyed, not when I'm trying to drive down the street. And who's going to take care of all those leaves? I've been picking up leaves like crazy. So why are we trying to fix something that is not broken?
I appreciate hearing all the comments. My name is Margaret Black, and I was one of the evil people on the City Council a few years ago that approved this. So I think I should say something to explain that over the years, this has been looked at and looked at and looked at and studied, and there was a huge public process that went on. I sat through so many meetings where people, just like you, came and learned about it, where all the businesses were informed and came to learn about this process. So let's not say that it was done somehow in a corner, because it wasn't. The other thing is, I very much like the different divisions where we have something different on one node and then another and another, something to make our city interesting, and that it doesn't just look like a long road that happened. Yeah, interesting is good, and beauty is, do you like beauty? Okay. There's a lot of good things in this plan, and so far what I've heard is the concern about high density. And maybe that needs to be looked at and needs to be adjusted. But also, look at the good parts of the plan. Look at the efforts that have been made to make something beautiful go along State Street and to make it something where we all enjoy. Do you all enjoy the parks that are by every school? They're not on State Street. State Street has a different reason for being. But let's make State Street as attractive as we can, and I would certainly like some trees, and then we can look at what would benefit as far as median and so forth. So anyway, just want you to know, there are some people that do not want Orem to be like it was 50 years ago. This is now, and we need to move forward and make it even better.
I've heard the thoughts that we have to provide a place for all the people who want to come here. If there are people who all want a new Cadillac and they feel kind of bad because they can't have one, does somebody have to give them everything? I mean, to me that's nonsense. I mean, if there's not if there's not a need and not a place, there's not a place. With all these beautiful things that are planned, I was on the planning commission and the beautification committee in the 70s. We went through this. The city spent a lot of money. They sent people to Boulder, Colorado, Scottsdale, Arizona, had a fantastic plan for State Street. All down State Street was beautiful. They lowered the signs, not all the massive crazy signs. The area just south of the mall was an area of industrial building. Plans were for a meandering sidewalk, lots of trees, beautiful retail was the basis of it. None of that's happened. The city spent a lot of money for that. Nothing happened. The other thing is these great apartments that are attracting such great people. Give me those apartments 5 or 7 or 10 years from now, after they've had rooms in and out and that. They don't hold up, and the high class ones, people can't afford it. Those students at the universities are not living in those fancy apartments.
I'd like to step right up on my soapbox. So we have some homeless people in Orem, and when I drive past them, I want to cry because they don't have a place to go. I talked to a lady who was on the side of the street. She was begging, and she had a dog, and she was a victim of domestic violence. I myself have had to leave my former home because of domestic violence with 4 kids, and I want to know, what are we going to do to service these people? She had a dog, and she refused to go to a homeless shelter because her emotional support dog wasn't allowed to be in the shelter with her. She said she'd rather die on the street than leave her dog. It's not her problem. It's not her problem. We need, as a society, this is a societal problem, and we need to be able to take care of those who are less fortunate, those who are not able to care for themselves. As a single mom, I had 4 little children, and I didn't have anywhere to go. From that point, 4 years later, because I got the help that I needed, I was able to sit on HOA board. I was able to serve in my parties as a committee member. I was able to serve on various committees and give back. That is what we can do for people who are willing and wanting to move up. So what you guys are complaining about all of this. This is a beautiful plan, right? But it is for a lot of people. It is for a lot of people. But you guys, listen.
Please let her speak. Please show her the courtesy.
There are people who want to live in places like this. I'm not saying it is a perfect plan. And I'm not even saying that the high income, needing 20, who can afford a 3-bedroom apartment for $2,600, right? But we do need answers, we do need a plan so that we can service everybody. So let's come together as a community and come up with answers. Let's come up with a solution rather than complaining constantly. I'm complaining about your complaining. So come to me and tell me what your plan is. Where is a city that you actually like? Not 50 yees ago, but today. Where is a city? What are we going to do to move into the future?
So did I ask everyone who makes a comment to please give us your name first so we know who is speaking? Thank you.
I just wanted to make a quick comment. My name is Helena. And I do understand where this lady is coming from. I think we definitely have problems in our society. But I would like to address what Greg Hughes had suggested when he ran for governor. He addressed this. He said that we need infrastructure to support rural Utah, where we can support businesses moving into different areas. it will distribute the housing everywhere. We need jobs, we need housing. It can no longer be crammed into the valley. It is unaffordable, but we have got plenty of space in Utah if we would re-evaluate Greg Hughes's plan.
Hi everyone, my name is Kiri, and I was born and raised here in Orem, and I've also had the privilege of living around the world in many different places, and I've lived in small and big cities with 20 times the number of people and some of the best public transportation systems in the world. And every time I come back here, I am struck by a couple of things. One, I'm struck by just what a beautiful little haven Orem and Provo are. I lived in Provo for a while as well, and I'm struck by just how great of a city this is. And I'm also struck by the sort of lack of development and progressive movement there is in this city. And by that I don't necessarily automatically mean more high-density housing and making it into a little LA. I don't necessarily support that. But I will tell you a couple of experiences. One time I came back here from living abroad, and I in a place where I didn't have a car. I relied solely on public transportation and walking in beautiful streets, beautiful towns, and being in places that are so beautiful and that have so much interest, visual interest and cultural interest, that they draw people out on foot, and they're wonderful places to enjoy many different cultural events and getting together as community members. But I came back here and I specifically chose not to have a car for a year. And just to kind of see how I could get around the city. And to be honest, it was a miserable experience. And I have always supported public transportation for decades. I have always supported it, and even supported it when it was much less developed than it is right now, in an effort to support it, to give more credence to it. But it was a very challenging experience to really get around. And
What year was that?
That was, that's a good question. It was, I want to say around 2010, so it was a few years ago.
That was prior to our UVX line being in place.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a huge improvement. So I applaud the efforts of whoever is in charge of this to really beautify the city and to make it more livable. I am part of that upcoming generation that cannot afford any of the housing anymore. There are so few choices, and it feels it's a very different economic environment than many of you were lucky enough to have. Quite honestly, it is a very different atmosphere and very many different opportunities, and it's incredibly difficult and incredibly disheartening to not have, to basically be looking at like spending $500,000 to just get a simple home. Another thing I want to say about high density housing, I've lived in lots of places where there are, outside of the US, where there are many, many families who live in high density housing. That is their norm. So living in a house on a quarter acre or a half acre of lawn is a beautiful experience. It can be a beautiful experience, but it is not necessarily the norm of most families around the world. And they often do it quite well. So I understand that there are concerns about high density housing. I have some concerns myself, especially about how high and how traffic is terrible. Traffic is terrible, and so that's something that I think really needs to be addressed. But I also I want to add something, another concern in about high density housing, and that is.
And then if you can end your comments so others can see that.
Sure. We live in a beautiful valley with views of the mountains nearby, And one of the things that I have always appreciated about the height of many buildings around Orem is that they are low enough that you can still see the mountains and this beautiful, beautiful vista that we have access to. So that would be something that I would ask to be looked at for a variety of reasons. I understand a lot of people have a lot of valid concerns. I support the development and the beautification of this city that I've always thought of as the ugly stepsister of the valley. But I also have some major concerns about resource management, especially water, traffic, and you know, preserving rural spaces. Yeah, thank you.
Have our next person who'd like to speak.
Last Monday when we were here, we were told that State Street was not owned by Orem City and that that's UDOT. So it is
correct.
Okay. So with the BRT and the light rail, is that a done deal from the state or do we get a say in that?
I'll just answer that one real quickly. That's the Central Corridor Mass Transit Project coming from Lehigh down towards Provo. And it has to be funded federally. It's something that the cities have gotten together and feel like would be a benefit for moving more people and getting more cars off the road and getting congestion held down. But it's not anywhere near a done deal. They're having many open houses on it, and it's going to take a lot of money to do it, so it's a concept right now.
Well, that brings up my issue with that when we see buses going up and down State Street that have very little or nobody on it, that expense at this time when the present transit system we have isn't being utilized as adequately as it could be. So with that, the additional expense and the traffic that it'll create around here, being able to cross the street and get to other businesses, is kind of a no-brainer not to do.
So I would recommend that you get involved because there's a lot of open houses going on with UDOT discussing that very thing. One thing you should be aware of with Front Runner coming down from Salt Lake, that takes a lane and a half of traffic off the freeway. The UVX bus takes 2,000 cars a day off of the University Parkway traffic. It lowers the congestion by 3 million pounds of CO2 per year. So, and it also eliminates about 1,600 parking spaces at UVU and BYU, allowing them to use their flatland space to build a building that they may need. But the rest of it, let's keep going with comments.
Well, I'm not done yet, because with that, there are a lot of people that are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that hold positions that they can't use the public transit to get home in time to make their meetings during the week. And so I get the whole point of making the front runner or making transit available, but we're not using what we have right now. As far as the occupancy of Orem, we only have so much land, and quantity never equals quality. And so all these people that are saying, well, I want high density housing so that my family can move back here, their kids aren't going to want to move back here, given that the congestion is going to be so high and that the crime rate is going to be so high. I have a business here in Orem, and our building was vandalized. And so we called the cops and said, hey, we want to let you know that this is going on. He came in and he said, what you got here, I'm not even going to report because it doesn't matter. And so if it's to that point where our building doesn't matter because it's vandalized, just because of the way that the kids did it, when do we get interested in it? And when we have a lot of people that are here and they don't have a lot to do, all the social programs that we're going to put in place for them, a lot of them aren't going to participate in that. As a businessman, I'm tired of paying the taxes that I do. I'm tired of working half days. Not 4 hours, 12 hours. And I do that every day just so that I can make my ends meet. So my last question with this is, does any of this get to be put on a ballot that then the residents get to vote on it?
So I'll be happy to answer that after everyone else gets a chance to make a comment. We want everyone to have a chance to make a comment.
A lot of us have to leave. You heard an hour from us. Let's hear from you.
I'm happy to talk at any time, but it's our desire that everyone have a chance to make a comment first. That's what we're trying to do. So, otherwise, we can go into question and answers, and many of you will not have an opportunity to make a comment, and I would like to hear from each of you and have an opportunity to do that.
Okay, I'm a taxpayer. I live here, so I'll make a comment. I'm also on the city council.
Yeah!
So